Hi everyone, welcome to the MBN Boston Data Podcast. Joining me is Wasim Mushtaq, founder and CEO of 1CG. Wasim has 20 years of experience in the banking, fintech and data sector, starting his career as a finance and business analyst to leading teams and spearheading transformational change at companies such as Barclays and Standard Chartered. Now Wasim heads up his own specialist strategic consultancy, 1CG, as well as supporting companies such as Birdie and Bankability as a strategic, advisory and board member. In this episode, Wasim will explore topics such as leadership strategy, operations and execution, leveraging AI and data operational excellence, creating products that align with customer needs and future trends, transformation of legacy systems, and the use of super apps within customer loyalty engagement. Wasim, thanks for joining me today. You've been a long time collaborator of MBN, acting as a thought leader at some of our events, and have a well-established footprint within the fintech industry as a go-to specialist within this area. But for the benefit of the audience, could you tell us more about yourself, your story, your journey within banking, fintech, and data in this space to date?
Hi, Josh. First of all, pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite. It's kind of weird, isn't it, being on a podcast and talking about yourself? I don't really like to do it too much. But since you ask, I never really thought I'd work in financial services, kind of funnily enough, or in banking. I actually wanted to be a games programmer when I was young. You know, me and my brother used to have all the consoles, and I used to really enjoy them. So I actually studied computer science at university, but I realized, you know, you have to make up credits so for other subjects. And what I realized actually was I was much better at economics, you know, and finance and math and things of that nature. So I ended up kind of pivoting and then kind of graduating from the University of Glasgow. And then I couldn't get a graduate role. I applied for nearly everyone. I couldn't get it. So I just really took the best role that I thought at the time, which was at the time it was a company called Abbey, which was then kind of taken over by Santander. This is going back, you know, probably showing my age, probably 2005 ish. And it was in SME kind of business banking. It was my kind of first introduction and insight into the world of banking and business, speaking to all the types of clients. Luckily for me, I managed to do a lot of like account opening and KYC and AML, as well as payments and client complaints. And I just managed to get a really good introduction to, like, you know, kind of business and business banking. What I realized though, at that time, and I had a really great manager as well, at the time, was I probably wanted to move to London, even though being kind of born and bred in Glasgow. A lot of my friends were moving to London, and it seemed at that time the jobs with the higher upside were more there. And it's changed now because, you know, in 2024, I think the dynamic is very different. But then, you know, if you want to work in the front office, for example, or things of that nature, you would go there. So ended up keeping it still Scottish. So I worked for RBS International in Bishopsgate. And that was a very interesting kind of role. Ended up, you know, again, kind of learning the ropes and working my way up. You know, after kind of 2-3 years, I was at the manager level. I was running a few desks. We did a lot of big programs. And then I moved to kind of Barclays, where, you know, again, there was another big introduction. And it's funny because like my career has pivoted on to various institutions. I've not really like applied for jobs per se. It's more been through my network, and people know what I can do and what I can't do and things of that nature. But yeah, I mean, I can't believe it really. I mean, it's been nearly 20 years. You know, looking at the video, I've seen I've lost all my hair, so that's fine. I've got a few grey hairs on the beard, but yeah, I still feel reasonably young, to be honest with you. And yeah, I'm just excited, you know, to now kind of pivot into the next stage of my career, which is more also on the advisory, you know, and board members and C-suite MD stuff. That's fine. And delivery, but also like pivoting more to kind of building my own practice, and working and choosing people that I work with. And it's just been a fun ride ever since, and hopefully the next 20 years are just as fun, if not more.
Well, that's really good to hear, and it's good to hear a bit more about your background in gaming as well too. I'm myself a big fan. PlayStation's just done their 30th anniversary this year as well too. So if you've got a PS5, I just logged in yesterday actually, and the PlayStation 1 boot screen came up as part of like
Awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was really nostalgic, but 30 years is a long time. So yeah, I'm still
We're
living.
going to go off topic very quickly, but I
Go
did
for it.
go. I did go like a month ago with my wife and kids to the British Science Museum, and they've got something called like 40 years of gaming or something. I can't remember. I think it's called Gamer. It's got every console, like from like the Spectrum, Atari, the Commodore 64, all the way up to the current generation. So like it was amazing me playing like Star Fox, with my daughter on the SNES. It was just really good fun, a really good time.
That's good. I wish I kept all my consoles. I was at a retro place in Glasgow recently, and the prices for things like Dreamcasts and Mega Drives are astronomical.
Really.
So don't know whatever happened to them, but they're somewhere. Hopefully, getting looked after. But look, anyway, let's move on to it. So, in terms of how we were introduced, I actually met you at one of our events, and you were one of the keynote speakers there. Michael, our CEO, introduced yourself to me, I believe, and I was sort of really impressed with how you commanded the room and the sort of thought leadership you had in the space. And I immediately saw you as an SME. So I'm really keen to talk about your leadership and strategy and how that has affected your career and your mindset as well too. So keen to find out about your leadership mindset and approach to driving change within the industry. Find out more about what your approach is in terms of aligning leadership and innovation within the fintech space. So my first question to you would be, what is your approach to aligning leadership within the fintech space?
So I think my leadership style has evolved over time. Before it was very much, like lead from the front, make sure everyone knows what to do, be right always, just that North Star, but all that kind of good stuff. But as I've worked with many leaders and learned from a lot of people in the industry, and as well as being really part of really good teams, what I've learned is true leadership is situational. So it depends on the situation, and it also depends on what people who you're working with and the goal. So if you break that down, you can have situations where you're firefighting, and you have to react. You could have situations where you can be more strategic in nature, and break it down and make a plan accordingly. And then depending on the emotional nature of the people you're working with as well and the teams, I think I try to lead more with empathy now, actually, and more understanding. I think everyone, obviously since kind of COVID and remote working and hybrid now, just being a lot more understanding on where people are in their own journeys and focusing on deliverables. And then the other thing I would say is being very clear in your communication on what the expectations are from you and the team and where you are in that journey of delivering something. Because there are a lot of lessons to be learned. I don't really like the word kind of failure, just lots of lessons to be learned of like not getting it right first time or not just having it delivered. For me, they're kind of stepping stones to success. So for me, it's really just being kind of open and transparent and also basically saying, hey, like, yes, I have 20 years and yes, I've done X, Y, Z, but I don't know it all. So for me, it's like the best idea must win. It doesn't matter if it's come from like an intern, or from an advisor or what have you. And just really being open and transparent with that. The other thing I would say is that my focus on leadership now, it's not like that's the target. It's a straight line. Let's just go. There are many ways to get there. And sometimes you come up across an object that you can't actually move. You have to find a way to navigate around it. So for me, it's been kind of really flexible now. In the approach, and I think it's gone well. Also, like just talk to people like human beings. Honestly, it's like I know it's like a weird thing to say, but we're under pressure in the corporate world, but we're all human beings. And in my time, especially in like change and transformation, every program that succeeded or every program that has failed is being due to inertia in human beings and fear and doubt, and I always say people are the enablers, but they're also the disablers, right? So like it's just kind of working with people and making sure that you get the best out of them and you give them the opportunity to succeed. I know there's a lot of kind of cliches here, but I mean, honestly, like, I think that's the best way because I also have learned from leaders that I felt that were very good and I felt that perhaps were a little bit too much on one spectrum, right? And I know how I like to be treated, So like, I think that's the way I've evolved my leadership style.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's struck a chord there in terms of, leading how you would like to be led as opposed to how you were led yourself, for better or worse as well too. That's something I've learned over the years too. So definitely agree with that. What I think a lot of people may struggle with within business and specifically data as well too, and within the fintech space. Sometimes from the conversations I have is short-term execution versus long-term strategy. So in your opinion, how do you balance that from your expertise?
Yeah, it's this yin and yang, right? And push and pull. The reality is, and I have kind of worked my way up that ladder, right? The reality is that you're paid to deliver, right? In any job that you're in, whether it's your roles and responsibilities or your daily task, whatever, you have a set assigned task list, which are yours. And if the wider cog in the wider machine the company is to work, you need to make sure you're doing this bit, all right, and doing it effectively, efficient, more automation, blah blah blah. That's fine, and that is with the understanding of this is the current operating model or the system that you're working in right now. Okay, but in business, as in life, as in ecosystems and peoples, the world demographics evolve and change. Like when I first started, there wasn't really a smartphone, right? There was the Nokia kind of 3210s and all that kind of stuff. So, so banking or whatever industry you're in evolves given the technology within the ecosystem as well, right? Like mobile banking, internet banking, all that kind of good stuff. So knowing that you have to do the best you can with what you're supposed to do, that's great in the here and now. However, if you always focus like that and be closed-minded like that and with the blinkers on, the reality is that probably after the 2 to 3 years, and it is like a 3-year window, by the way, I'll tell you why in a minute, what you're doing basically becomes obsolete, right? Or it becomes surplus to requirements because the world changes around you. New competitors come up. There's new extra expectations from customers. Technology changes. There's companies going bust, and the economics of the world change, right, and so forth. So, you can't do what you always do the way you do it. And the reason why I say this is because in leadership, there is something called like the leadership change cycle, which I've actually kind of studied and looked into a lot, which is every 3 to 5 years, usually there's like a new leader of a function or a company or a department, and they always want not to make their mark. They always want to see what can they improve from a stewardship perspective. And, they say, well, these things are still required, like these 20%, but this 80% needs to change now. So there's always some form of transformation. There's some form of change. There's some form of improvement, innovation, I like to call it as well. So that being said, you have to look forward on the horizon. And the reason being is because the future is on the horizon. The future is not in the past. And whilst we get paid and hired for things we've done in the past, we don't get paid for that. That's not valuable to us going forward, right? And the way to be more valuable actually is to figure out better ways to do the same thing or newer ways to do new things, because that's where the world is moving towards, right? So when I've always spoken to my teams, because I've ran global operational teams in banks and I've ran large transformation teams where we just transform, right? And I've been I've received the change and I've delivered the change, right? So, and no one likes change. It's like when they say, oh my God, we've just got our processes right now and you want to change everything, systems. The reality is this, when the leadership sets the tone and the agenda, then, that's the vision. the company does need to follow, because if they don't, the reality is then you get silos in companies, and eventually you get what I call conflicts, conflicts of interest, right? So it's about understanding the why of the change and the transformation, and then ensuring that people understand what is their journey and input into that transformation, and how actually their life, their job, their work will be better as a result. So I know I kind of went in a tangent there, but I always kind of talk about that, because when I'm about to like lead a big global transformation, the first day, I just get everyone in a room and I talk about the why. Like, why are we actually doing this? Why is it needed? Is it not needed? Let's kick the tires. What aspect of it could be better? Before we go on this path, let's be clear we're committing for the right reasons. And there's a lot of negotiation in this, because the older I've got, and maybe hopefully the wiser I've got, I've realized, there's a lot of various agendas at play. Not everyone in the room is maybe a well wisher of this thing you're trying to do. But I agree with this concept, and I think it was not Steve Jobs. I think it was Bezos. But he's saying sometimes not everyone will agree, but sometimes what they'll do is that they will disagree, but they'll commit, right? And I think that's absolutely fine as well. So for me, it's always been explaining the reason why we're doing something, the journey, and then your input into it. But again, I love that part in the beginning where everyone's kicking tires, because the tires have to be kicked. Because I'll tell you one thing, having a funky PowerPoint presentation, or the journey in a whiteboard, is only as good as the paper or the whiteboard is written on. When you actually start to do it, you realize that was about 80% wrong, right? And you have to evolve and change and pivot. And the leader, me or someone else, is not going to know it all. The people that know are the people on the ground, that are listening to the customers, that are managing the systems, that are improving the products, that hear the customer complaints, that need to do the reporting, that need to do the reconciliation, nostril breaks, whatever it is. They know what works and they know what doesn't. And they actually will tell you what's right and wrong. So for me, it's always been about empowering the teams that are doing the transformation, and then really making them understand only 20% of the thing you do right now is probably going to stay the same in the next 3 years. So embrace it, because the people on that journey are the ones that are going to have the most to gain.
Definitely. I think in regards to strategy as well too, or let's call it transformation, data transformation, digital transformation, there's now an advent of AI transformation in play, and that will be happening over the next several years. And I think, again, you've struck a chord there when it comes to the practitioners will really be leading some of the strategy elements of that role, because they're the people that specialize in AI or LLMs or data or data science or engineering or whatever you want to call it, machine learning. And then if you're able to take that on board and move forward with that as a strategic leader, you're going to be empowered by that as well too. You can't do everything yourself effectively. Well, that moves on to my next question when it comes from strategy to operations to execution, leveraging AI and data for operational excellence. So in your words, I'd be keen to find out how you would ensure seamless execution in large-scale transformation projects.
So I would say seamless execution is probably on a spectrum, because I think you have to define seamless and execution depending on who you're talking to. My point has always been about progress. So I've had to deliver some really kind of difficult things in my career. I mean, my last role, I was the chief operating officer for the Centre for Finance, Innovation and Technology, which was like the main recommendation in the back of the CLIFA review of UK fintech, and it was to do something that had never been done before in UK, in the UK. which was to set up a new industry body focusing on innovation and bringing together competitors and various parts of the ecosystem to align on a mission and deliver an outcome on whatever's been agreed. And we focus on open finance on the first one. And just the negotiation and the management of input IP and output IP and various agendas and so forth was kind of extremely, extremely interesting. But the reason why I bring that one up is because and this is what actually my old kind of boss told me, Charlotte Crosswell, with a lot of respect for. She told me the job is to get everyone on the start line at the same time and for them to know where they want to go, as in where's the target, and then go. And people will go fast, some people will go slow, some people will not start in the beginning and then go afterwards. They probably want to see where people are going, but everyone knows what they need to do, right? And progress is relative, So I say that's the first thing. The second thing when it comes to execution, so you can have systems in place, processes, controls. I'm a big believer in Agile. I delivered one of the first programs in Barclays that used just Agile. So I remember in the mornings running the Scrum, looking at the Kanban board, moving some of the Post-its, bringing the products teams up, talking about it, then speaking to the developer, everyone having a 30-second, where are you now, what you're doing, what help do you need? You can have all of that, and that's good. But I think that only works if it actually supports progress. I'm not a believer of like checkpoints and meetings for the sake of it. If people have nothing to update, then they have nothing to update. But figure out, well, were you supposed to have something to update by now, right? So it's about holding people accountable for what they're supposed to do. Secondly, I would say making sure that they have the support to deliver what they're supposed to. And third is to not give updates on the day of when something is required to say it's not ready, right? I'm just not a believer of that. I always tell teams, I don't care if you make a mistake, just try not to make the same mistake twice. And if you don't know what caused the mistake in the beginning, let's kind of really get into that, because I'm sure everyone else will probably make that mistake. So let's learn from this. I've got a no blame culture. If anything fails, honestly, it's on me. I've always been a big believer of if we succeed, it's the team, and if we fail, it's the leader. And I think that is leadership, by the way, and that is a good way to do leadership. So that then blends in, seamless execution, transformation, innovation, because at the end of the day, the way things get done is that you do something and then you review it and then you iterate it and then you repeat the process. I think the worst thing anyone can do is kind of like procrastination. And the other worst thing and that's just speaking for me as well. And the other worst thing anyone can do is plan, but never execute.
Yeah.
Because it just kills you. I mean, I've been in these planning sessions back in the day where you'd be planning a program for weeks on end. And really, what we should have just done was get on a round table with everyone involved saying, this is what we're trying to do. How do we do it? Like, honestly, it's so simple. But I've really learned recently, just the power of clear communication and understanding what you're trying to deliver in the context of where you're trying to deliver it. Because I've worked in many banks and lots of fintechs. How you deliver like a platform delivery might work in a bank, but might not work. It might work in a global bank, but might not work in a regional bank, right? Or how you go to market for a new product in a fintech might work if you're in lending, but it might not work if you're in pensions or, in payments, right? So you got to be flexible. And yes, because this can also be like a trap where you've had success doing something this way, so you always naturally kind of gravitate to that. But if the team is different, the context is different, the environment is different, you're very likely going to have to do something different to get it done. The fundamentals always work, right? But how you get there is about just evolving and iterating it. And that's been my experience, actually, because someone, I know I've been talking for a long time, sorry about that, but I know, but someone did tell me actually this, and they told me, like, you could take it how you wish, but you can say basically it would seem like, yes, we do pay you to think, but we pay you more to deliver, right? And that's the nature of the game, really. So the people that are comfortable in that context will always do well.
Yeah, definitely. Again, I think with what you were saying when it comes to context, from a data perspective as well too, or let's call it a talent perspective, we find just because an individual, a data specialist, may be coming from a financial services background, they may not gel specifically with another organization within that space because it's a different culture, it's a different environment, it's different use cases, there's different challenges to have as well too. So a wider remit usually of candidates within the data space from maybe non-banking sectors can even add just as much value as well too, and thought for the process as well. So I definitely understand that. It's not one doesn't fit all, is what I'm trying to say there.
Can I just say one thing on that point, because I think you've mentioned something very interesting there. I didn't really cover AI and data kind of too much in that spiel. But I do want to say one thing, which is that over time, I've definitely had increased my appreciation for data. And data is its own language, really. And, the companies that have really invested in data and their capabilities in data to then create insights, have always done better than companies that don't, because you have more data to make more informed decisions, right? And the companies, for example, now that are leaning into AI and AI agents, and AI automations and all that. Well, how are the SLMs and the LLMs actually working? They're working on data sets, right? Yes, you've got OpenAI and all these other kind of Anthropic and all the other companies that have more kind of public kind of data that they've trained upon. But if you're bringing that into your company under a closed ecosystem, right, they're going to work off your data as well. So if your data is messy, it's not segmented, it's not cleaned, it's not a source of truth, you're going to get garbage in, garbage out. So this is the point where now a lot of people are looking at these AI applications and opportunities, but still realizing like, crap, we cannot miss the boat, but we really should have done this data thing properly. And the people that have already done it are now kind of even increasing their distance and separation. Yeah. So it's like, it's one of these things that, what I talked about, the change cycle. If you don't get this in order now, forget it. I think you're out of business within 3 years. Like, it's really that, because it's really that fast as well. Some of the programs I'm working with some of the top banks that I advise with, some of the product teams, they're the call centers, as well as some of the fintechs that are doing kind of B2B kind of service delivery for the bank. Because like, I'm looking at it from like, what are the banks buying, what are the fintechs creating that the banks are buying, and so forth. It's all about automation. It's all about innovation. It's all about AI. It's all about efficiency. And, and then from there, leveraging sparks where you can create more products. So it's like so important now. It's like an essential part of the business. Like, it just is now.
I was going to ask you a question regarding that. I mean, do you see a lot of resistance to change when it comes to AI or data transformation within your industry? And if so, is there any specific area that you have trouble with when it comes to resistance?
So yes and no. So one of the reasons why I decided to kind of start my own agency, kind of model, was that I wanted to work with more people that say yes to change, and are what I would call a early adopter when it comes to new technology. So from that perspective, me kind of deciding who I work with as well, I've not seen that much resistance to change initially. However, when you then try to, once you create the proof of concept or the MVP, then you try to actually deliver that within the organization and scale it. Yes, absolutely. You will see individuals that don't really want to be impacted by it. And that's been the case from the very beginning when it comes to like change management and digital transformation. However, I think it's so evident and clear now that the upside is so high that even if you are like a deterrent of it, you won't be a deterrent for long, because if you keep fighting against it, like it'll just go around you. Do you know what I mean? So from that perspective, it's a lot less, and that could be more for like regulatory reporting or anything that has like a compliance kind of level to it, or where there's been so much work on internal segregation that they don't really want to bring in other external elements to it, because unfortunately, even if you bring in a few external elements, it changes the whole operating model. But that is the nature of financial services, that is the nature of commerce and most industries now. So this procrastination inertia is actually going to do that individual more harm than good, I'll be honest with you. And I always approach it from that perspective, actually.
Yeah, it's a bit of a balancing act from what I'm reading and having conversations with people, is that this space, we'll move on quickly to product development soon and it'll be relevant, but there's a lot of innovations happening technologically right now that can be used for products and services. Yeah. However, I think data governance potentially might be getting left aside in some of these instances, and it has to catch up. So when it comes to regulation and applying these products and services, it feels like there's a slight lag, and there's a lot of people really pushing forward for new change, but there needs to be a bit of a bedding in time, effectively. But
so on that point though, can I, Josh, you've mentioned something which is really interesting. Obviously, you've got the smart data bill, which is now going to go into obviously like second stage of legislation, then empower the PRA and FCA to get a call for input, and that's how we use data, right? Within various industries, and then you've got the DPDI bill, which was like Data Protection, Data Information Act, again, which is evolving. Now, what we don't have yet is like an AI regulation, really. Mm-hmm. You have the AI kind of act in the EU, which I think is going to be kind of reviewed again. So I'm always a big believer that you need regulation to like create the guardrails, but then don't tell industry how to move within the guardrails, because they need that flexibility. But also there's something else, an element that I think is important to cover off, which was mentioned in one of the panels that I was moderating like a month ago at an event, which was the ethical element of data. And what I mean by that is any system or application inherently created behind, like AI or LLMs is bias. Because as individuals, we all have a cognitive biases, right? And this improvement in technology now is actually going to help people identify who they would deem good customers or more profitable customers. And on the flip side, identify people that they don't want to maybe do business with as much, like vulnerable customers or risky customers. But if you create a model that you're just kind of identifying the good versus like, the supposed bad more, and then focus more on the good, you are going to create more divide and more gaps in the ecosystem. So we need to really start with the outcome first that we're trying to do. And the outcome should be, we want to give better products and services to as many consumers and businesses as we can across the spectrum, and we want to give them it at the most affordable rates that we can, which means that people should be paying less for the same product. We should not be increasing our margin, for the same product. And this is where the I think the businesses that are ethically minded and have that outcome front and center are actually going to do better, because the world has changed. People expect that type of sustainability and ethical approach. And yes, the shareholders want, ROI and profits and all that kind of good share value price. But even like ESG and so forth, it's important parts of the company now. And are companies just greenwashing it, or are they proving it? And I think that is going to be an evolvement. So the industry is going to evolve into that. I'm pretty sure. I've already seen fintechs that are doing that and are doing well, and I'm working with them in the background as well.
That's great. That fits perfectly into my next question, which is going into customer needs and future trends. I really want to speak to you about embedded finance and AI in financial product evolution. What trends do you see that are shaping the future of financial products in this space?
I mean, that's such a kind of big topic question. I could probably speak to you all day about it, so I tried to be concise though. Right, okay. So I would say the first thing is the expectations of individuals now are kind of convenience and personalization and embedded kind of journeys. So this thing about kind of super apps is definitely evolving in financial services. You've got WeChat and Alipay. In Asia, kind of doing very well. You've got a few others in South America. No one's really cracked in the EU yet. You could say, like maybe Revolut is trying to create something. And to be honest, when I hear some of their leaders speak and some of people who work in that company speak, and I know that they've got a very high kind of experimentation type of mindset, creating various types of solutions that somehow going to be connected. So there's definitely that element. There's definitely this element of the products that people get recommended should be somehow kind of personal to them and should make sense to them. So there is this thing about the sharing of data, and then customers really seeing the value of that sharing of data, right? It's not so I can get better advertisements pushed my way. No, like I really need new products. And then I would say this thing about finance and financial services not being as reactive, as in being more proactive. Like an example, a very simple example, kind of, I have a mortgage that is like on a 3-year fixed term. Within kind of 1 year or 6 months of it coming up, you'd expect the system or the bank say, right, this is how much you've currently repaid down. It looks like this is the value of your property now. Scanning the market, these are the 5 best options depending on what you want to do. If you want to even break your mortgage or XYZ, this is the pros and cons of it. How would you like to react? How would you like us to proceed? Blah, blah, blah. And like, people want the thinking kind of done for them now, and not in like a lazy way, but the data is there and the information is there and the value is there. People want to be able to see the 3 best options and then just decide, or even be told, these are 3 best options. These are why, the pros and cons of each. We recommend X, Y, Z depending on your goals. So it's moving a lot more to like financial planning and financial betterment. However, that only works if individuals are not living kind of paycheck to paycheck, right? And let's be honest, the economy is difficult at the moment, and not everyone has that luxury. I remember when rates went sky high, and everyone's saying, "Oh, it's a great time to save." Yeah, but people have no money to save, right? So it's kind of like it's a great thing, but wrong timing. So, and the other thing I would say is that I think the fundamentals don't change. People need access to money. They need it for as cheap as possible, and they need it for probably as long as possible and flexible. They need the access to products. The world also and commerce is global, so they don't really want to be paying charges to do global commerce. And the reality now is that like everyone can technically be a business. This world is changing, so people need access to merchant services and things of that nature. And I see that evolving as well in terms of point of sale. Really interested more about how AI is going to work, not only in automating and making more products more efficient, but also reducing maybe the admin and legwork for individuals as consumers, and for AIs to be like personal AI bots to help you achieve your own personal goals. I think of it like a financial advisor, or think of something of that nature. I'm already working with many fintechs that have an AI platform to help you achieve your financial goals. I mean, they are a dime a dozen, so like there's a lot happening there at the moment. But I always say, if you want to see the future of financial services, look at where the investment is going. So if you look at private equity and VC and angels, like they're all investing in AI. They're all investing in things that will make things more faster, quicker, automated, and that will give customers more options. So that trend is not going to stop, because that's where the focus and energy is going, right? And then, yeah, there'll be like companies that don't succeed, or they get acquired and so forth. But that is definitely an objective. Apart from that, it's kind of difficult to say, because the banking industry really has only made money on three main kind of elements, on transactions, right? Where there's a margin, on lending, where, there's a margin, and then from various kind of products and services. Really, I mean, that's the bread and butter of banking financial services. I will see, and I do see, spin-offs like happening, like small ecosystems, like the payments ecosystem evolving in a different way. I think an untapped one for me is this thing about open finance. I'm a big believer in open banking. A lot of the world, have caught up and have not accelerated past the UK just doing open finance. I think everything is moving into the smart kind of data world, where data is an enabler. But I think I really want to see something that the ecosystem has access to, like high quality data, and then can make good informed decisions on it, whether it's free, or like a pay per use. But I think there needs to be this movement now, especially with the whole kind of digitization piece happened. Data is the key. And yeah, I'm hoping, and I'm really seeing everyone I speak to are just on top of their data game. Like it's just really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, just keep holding that train of thought when it comes to open finance. I wanted to quickly shift to platforms as well too within the finance space. So API interoperability, and obviously AI native operations as well too. What do you think is going to be the most pressing challenge in transforming legacy systems, and how do you see AI native operations redefine the industry?
So if you're a fintech or like a startup or so forth, you're not going to have this problem, because you shouldn't really have any legacy platforms, right? So from there, their challenges, they are creating the solutions that have some AI capabilities, but then they are selling into these older organizations that do have the legacy. When it comes to legacy, there are a few things, and I did work in the chief information office for Barclays for about kind of 4.5 years, like delivering kind of global transformations and programs. So I did see this, especially when you're delivering a new platform, right? Legacy is there for a reason, and 20% of it will always be needed, because the operating model in the system that creates money, by the way, is there. So you can't just say scrap legacy, because it'll always be needed. I'm not saying like in terms of the COBOL days, but I'm saying legacy is there for a reason. And I've seen some crazy architecture drawings of the tech stacks of banks. There's no way you're taking out legacy. It's just impossible. But you could definitely reduce your dependency on legacy by starting to shift into, I would say, more kind of modular, componentized platform thinking. And then starting to shift the weight of these processes and data warehouses and mainframes onto these new platforms. What I've seen over the last kind of 10 years has been this big shift of transferring a lot of legacy applications and decommissioning them and moving them to like a platform model, where this platform one platform replaces like 10 legacy platforms, right? And then what you get to is that And these platforms are external, by the way. So they're run by a different company. And like, you've got lots of ones, right? Like, you know, you've got Charles River, you've got kind of Mambu, you've got Avaloq, you know, depending on where you work in the ecosystem, FIS, platform securities, whatever. And then what's happening is a lot of these banks' tech stacks are now having like maybe 10 chunky platforms with legacy dispersed all over as well. But then what's happening again on that is then they're trying to realize, well, what's our dependency in these platforms? Because these external platforms, right, they're a core solution where then you can tweak the kernel for it to work within your institution, your reporting, your regional demographics, so forth. But there's this balance between on-prem and off-prem, cloud, and not outsourcing what the regulators call the crown jewels. Because what's happened now is everyone is dependent on the cloud, if AWS and Azure go down, most of the UK banking ecosystem is done. And people have been fined for this, right? So it's this balance now that, well, we went through this cloud journey. It's definitely part of the future, but we need to bring some things back on-prem. So it's been very interesting because now I'm not saying reverse engineering, but there's this element of we need to be masters of our own destiny again. And the reason I say this is because if you outsource all your platforms, then you're not in control. And if you do want to change something, like it might have like that's going to be like a change impact assessment. That's a 1 million kicker, like just to kick off the program. So banks and even technology people that I've spoken to are starting to slowly bring this back in, but be very specific in what you bring back in and what you don't. And then this element of AI, again, not many banks have. So some banks have definitely gone live with AI chatbots, AI assistants. Maybe JP Morgan's been quite prominent in having an internal AI bot to help you be more efficient in a closed loop system. I actually work with a company at the moment. It's a strategic partner, being fully transparent, kind of Birdie, and they develop AI enabled client insights to improve the voice of customer, understand the noise, and create analytics from that. And the way it works is, they basically have a data river, and they have all the inputs that go into this river, and those inputs can be legacy as well. And then the outputs are on the platform that can then be connected, and it's connected to Jira, and every CRM you can imaginable, and social media. So the reality is that it's about figuring out how can, through open APIs and connectivity, how you can connect with the legacy and take what you can from the legacy and putting it into the platform. That's why I think that's the balance now that I'm seeing. And obviously kind of reducing your dependency every 6 months, every year on legacy, because the reality is legacy actually is expensive to maintain. Mm-hmm. And everyone's trying to reduce their tech stack. And eventually, there will be situations where you probably can remove the legacy. But if everyone goes out and trying to just make that, we're going to remove all our legacy, I think you're going to fail, because the industry does not have all the solutions to replace legacy. If they did, there would be no legacy.
Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act. That's what we find as well too. And it's cost versus control. I think you hit that perfectly. If you can find a balance of that, great. When it comes to legacy systems as well, there may soon one day not be a specialist for the system you currently run because they've all moved into the cloud as well. So it's being careful on what you what you add and subtract when it comes to to your database or your solution and service or product. So completely agree, and that's happening right now. And we actually even see some of our clients move back, like you said, move back into legacy or hybridize it between on cloud and legacy based on their needs now, as opposed to just going fully on cloud, because it is a cost. So that's definitely something we're seeing too.
There is this pressure, with cost, especially if you're like a global bank, because you use these systems and they work. And, now you want systems that work across the organization, like a transaction cycle that do, like, for example, I like onboarding. Well, onboarding for every client type in every region for every segment, and then just can tweak it. But the reality is, like, you have different reporting requirements. Banking is global, but data and reporting has its own nuances depending on which country you're in and which product you're in, and vice versa. And then you've got all the different regulators. Like, I worked in Standard Chartered, for a period of time. I was leading and delivering global transformation, 45 different regulatory markets, 45 different sets of regulatory controls and reporting, and 45 sets of different types of questions that the regulator would ask you. It's not easy. And that's why it becomes difficult to scale these types of solutions. So what I'm seeing is like pockets of innovation across kind of companies and banks and what have you. And then you find, like, not the secret sauce, but you find the 2-3 main connectors from those pockets of innovation that then will spur on another type of innovation for another type of client segment. And I think that's how people are going to evolve and win in this game.
Yeah. Sticking to this point as well, to evolution. We talked about this earlier, super apps and future trends in industry. Now, obviously, there's a potential for super apps to redefine financial ecosystems globally. There are some examples, companies like Alipay, WeChat. I'm keen for you to define what a super app is. In my opinion, it's an all-encompassing, self-contained platform. I'm keen to find out how a super app could affect the finance industry and potentially what lessons organizations in the West could learn from successful super apps abroad.
Right. Okay, this is a very, very good question. I just want to kind of get my thinking right, but also kind of be clear. So, super apps, it really depends on the context, right? A super app, by definition, would be something that encompasses many types of industries, many types of problems in one home, right? And the examples you've mentioned there, right, about WeChat and Alipay and so forth, right? The reason they've worked well is because they've got B2C services and B2B services, right? And what do I mean by, like, B2C? Well, you've got messaging, you've got social networking, you've got mobile payments, e-commerce, ride hailing, food delivery, even games, right? And like kind of mobile SIM cards and insurance, wealth management, utility payments, like travel booking. It's basically all the things that people need to do. They can do it. But then you've got kind of B2B as well. Within that, believe it or not, you've got, official accounts for businesses. You've got mini programs. You've got advertising. You've got CRM tools, merchant services, business lending, analytics, right? So for me, a super app is a platform that will solve lots of problems and jobs to be done that individuals and companies need to do. And the super app definition for me is that it becomes an ecosystem where you've got buyers and sellers and users and creators combining, and it's kind of like self-evolving, which is the super app can survive in its own ecosystem because it is self kind of funding it and evolving it, right? So that's kind of one thing. What you're seeing though is, and I'm thinking of how to say it, what you're seeing is that for certain regions, it's really kicked off. Like in China, Asia, in some elements, kind of Latin America, like for example, kind of Rappi is a very good one. Food, kind of grocery, kind of delivery, pharmacy, things of that nature. The reason why they've all worked well is because you've got one big landmass that has the same regulation and the same processes and controls and the same expectations from a big group of consumers, and you've been able to scale. Okay, none of these are really banks per se, so the regulatory restrictions have been lower as well. The problem is like when trying to deliver a super app in Europe, for example, I would say, is that it's not a pick and drop of the same problem set. The problems and the jobs that we're trying to do are different. Yes, as human beings, we want to have insurance, we want to go on holiday, we want to make payments, we want to buy, blah, blah, blah. But it's not just like it's not like a bunch of widgets that you just put on an app and that's a super app. No, what I'm seeing actually is super apps evolving in various industries. Now, I mentioned kind of Revolut, kind of Monzo, or whatever you want to say, evolving into some type of financial super app where you've got all types of segments. But basically, like that's what a bank is, like some form. It's not an app; it's just a super business. But then you've got like the travel industry, where you've got like Expedia or Booking.com or what have you. They're trying to look at every part of the supply chain, and offer a service. And what's going to happen, I think, is that you're going to have maybe 4 or 5, whatever, super apps in their own ecosystem try to converge into some type of platform. Now, some people say, well, what platform is that going to be? Well, you could say, well, the platform is actually just going to be in this, the mobile phone. That's the platform. This is technically the super app. And there's no need for something else. Maybe. I don't know. But I think this is where open finance would enable a super app for financial services, right? So it's not there yet, because if it was, you'd only need one app, one bank just to do everything. And that's not the case, because there's so many fintechs coming up with new solutions. So it's an evolving space. I don't know if I've answered your question, I'll be honest with you, but no, it's quite a complex question, I'll be honest.
Yeah. Definitely, and I think you've been right in terms of they've been successful abroad, but because of regulations in the United Kingdom and Europe, it's a lot harder to implement specifically within the financial services space. So, to give you an example, you'll know that super apps obviously store a large amount of personal data to facilitate the delivery of services and goods, and that opens up breaches and people for personal data being stolen. So I think one example in 2020, an Indonesian super app, it's an e-commerce app called Tokopedia, lost over 91 million users' data, or stolen the data by hackers. So if that happened in a financial service specific app for a bank, that could be absolutely disastrous. So I mean, what regulation? My question to you would be, what regulatory and cultural hurdles do you think that need to be addressed for this type of adoption in Europe?
I think some regulatory guidance probably would be valuable, or maybe even like a call for input, from the industry of what would be acceptable guardrails or what would be logical things to consider. Obviously, you've got kind of the wider ecosystem like GDPR, and so forth that banks need to kind of work within. You mentioned the EU. That's interesting because like when you had like PSD kind of 2, and then a PSD 3, that's a directive, right? And what a directive is by the EBA, European Banking, is that then every country then needs to put that into their own law and make it a standard, right? So there really needs to be this way to unify like the key guardrails across kind of industries. And that's the only way you can scale, because it's too expensive to have a nuance reporting or regulation for this demographic. And then what happens if like the individual is like a citizen of 2-3 countries, and then what happens if they're traveling? So like they're using the app, but they're in different locations at different times. And then what reporting requirement do you have to use? And is it for the business that is the seller of the app, or is it for the buyer in a different location of the app in the region, right? And then for what product? Because the products will have different regulatory reporting as well. So before you know it, you've got these network effects and nodes that you've got, nearly exponential types of requirements, and that's why it's not scaled. I think anyway. Like if someone asked me, right, we're saying build a super app, for financial services, I would say like, no, what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to create best in class in 2-3 things instead. And then from there, I'm going to see what my customer demographic is, how they evolve and what they want. And then I'm going to build it and build it and build it. Organically, we'll create one. I'm not going to just create one, because I don't know what they want. And that's the other thing. We have a roadmap of other parts of the world where super apps have succeeded, but that's not the roadmap for here. So that's kind of where we are in that perspective. But yeah, some type of collective thinking would help. Now, I don't work for CFIT anymore, but maybe that could be a coalition. Like we want to empower the industry to create super apps. Let's come together and figure out what we can do with the data we've got under the regulations that I currently have, and is that viable? As in, do we need more? The reality probably would be like, yeah, we do need more, and like let's open up some of the regulatory discussions. I do like the work, of the innovation hubs in these regulatory companies kind of coming together. There's the project, I think it's called Project Nexus, I think the name, where all the regulators are coming together to potentially create like global standards for open finance. I think that's like the types of initiative that we need to have as an industry to really help and enable. However, what I would say is this, and we're probably over the 40 minutes where we're supposed to be. What I would say is, if fintechs and banks are just hiding behind and waiting for regulation to give you the solution, you're going to wait forever, because it's not a silver bullet. You have to go out there, you have to experiment, you have to make things and break things and see what customers say, and find the pockets of innovation, and then kind of build upon that. So, and time is ticking. Like if you don't do it, somebody else will, because the barriers to entry now are so small. I would say, I'm not a coder, but I can create an app using a low code platform. I can go in Fiverr and hire someone who's very proficient and create UI journeys for an application. I can go somewhere else in Figma and make some wireframes. It's not that difficult now to really create something. And then it's a matter of then creating a MVP, showing to some people, and if they like it, getting some angel investment and just, scaling it. I mean, like, it is possible, right? So, and I speak to a lot of fintech founders that are bootstrapping, and good on them, right? So yeah, I mean that's the current situation, I would say, when it comes to super apps, and like it's really interesting actually, just because I think everybody wants it. No one really knows what they want.
Yeah.
So they have to see some to figure out, oh, I like that and I don't like that, and it's going to evolve over time. I think ask me again in 5 years.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll see.
No, well, 100% agree. And I think there's nothing out there in the market in our region that users or customers probably are demanding for, because they're not aware of it. So I think a mix of transformational change through leadership changes for these types of apps and customer-centric focused applications, and the actual customer needs and requirements and wants is probably going to drive change, as opposed to maybe governance in this space or safety, which is unfortunate. But these things happen. I'm sure we'll be pre-warned beforehand. But hopefully we have some sort of backing when it comes. These types of apps do get applied within a financial context, because people will be naturally quite scared to use them otherwise. But it does, again, you perfectly hit my last question, Wasim, and it was about future gazing and outlooking. So what is your outlook within the industry, within leadership, transformation and innovation in the next decade? I think you've probably talked about this already, but a good summary would be great off the conversation. Yeah,
it's actually, this one's quite interesting. I'll tell you why, because definitely speaking to a lot of people, I've got quite lucky now in terms of the circles that I'm in and the people that I'm speaking to, and them asking me like what's on the horizon, and me also hearing from their perspectives and strategy. And I'm probably going to say a few things, and that's the first thing I would say is that people and companies now are a lot open to innovation and exploring innovation as part of their long-term strategy, because they've realized, the market you can lose. So there's an element of protectionism kind of going on, but that's fine in terms of kind of FOMO. I also see the industry being a lot more open to kind of breaking, rebuilding, and rethinking parts of their company processes. Just because it's been done this way doesn't mean it needs to be done this way kind of forever. And realizing that there's a lot of untapped potential within the companies if you only just ask these individuals and give them an opportunity to really kind of break the mold, so to speak. I also see something evolving, which is quite interesting, and it's something I'm a big proponent of, which is kind of flipping your org chart. What I mean by that is that imagine the people in the front line speaking, like your employees, who are the primary contact to your customers, as the main architects now of innovation, because they hear the noise and they're closest to the pain points. So, and that should help inform and drive decision making, and then with support of leadership, middle management, you could basically improve your products and services. Maybe a few more things. I definitely, and CFIT can improve this. You can partner with your competition and your critics, and get out of your comfort zone to have bigger kind of growth opportunities. I see this thing about everybody wants to keep their slice of the pie, which is fine. But if you can combine together and make a bigger pie and still keep that slice, you're technically going to get more. If not, so I think people need to be a bit more, I would say, collaborative in their thinking. And I see that's happening. Happens in the fintech space, banking not so much, but even the fintech space, there are some sharp elbows. So just kind of balancing that. And then I think the last one I'm going to say is a lot of people think a compliance and regulation is like a barrier to innovation. I think the opposite. I think you need to do this program, new transformation, to be regulatory compliant by specific date, blah, blah, blah. Use that as a flywheel. Use that as an opportunity to see, well, what else can we bring along in that delivery to improve? Because we're digging up the road anyway, right? It's funny. It's one of my not now, thankfully, but kid used to watch Peppa Pig, and there's this guy. He's always digging up the road. Right? That's all he's doing. And you always, you go to. I live in London, and like people are digging up like the roads non-stop for like different things. You think, man, if you're going to dig up the road, just dig it up and figure out what are the 5-6 things you can do now. You know what I mean? So I think there's going to be more elements of that, because change, transformation, redoing the pipes is expensive. And there needs to be more strategic thinking on how, why, when, where you should do that, and for what outcome. So I'm definitely seeing that, because the programs that I'm seeing now are converging into a lot of things, But then there's the risk. Try to do everything, you can't do anything. So it's really about focusing on these key outcomes, the clear goals. So that's kind of like, I would say, a myriad of separate thoughts that I think are converging into this new wave of banking for the next 10 years, I think. So I'll stop rambling there, but I think that's where it's going.
No, that's absolutely perfect. I think it's a great insight into, not only your mind, but like the clients you work with, the experience you've developed over the years, and the topics that we've covered here have been great. So leadership, transformation, AI, governance. Thank you, Wasim. Thanks for joining us today. In terms of how any of our listeners could get in touch. Have you got anything we could? Is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners at all in terms of how they could get in touch with you and follow your content?
I mean, I try to be active on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. Wasim Mushtaq. That's quite simple enough. You can also send me an email if you wish. info@1cg.co.uk if you want to discuss any opportunities or collaborations. I do have a Calendly kind of link on my LinkedIn profile as well, so quite open, to be honest with you. I don't know if that was a good idea or a bad idea, but there you go.
Floodgates now.
Yeah, but it's fine. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I'm part of the community. I want to talk to people. I try to go to the audit industry event here and there as well and speak to people. So yeah, like, I'm nothing special. Just like, you see me, just tap me on my shoulder and say hello. We can always have a conversation. All good.
Perfect. Thanks again, Wasim. Thanks for your time and your insight here. Appreciate it.
All the best, mate. Thanks, Josh.